Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. We come to you on this Wednesday morning before what's going to be a great, great week of football on the Mike Francesa channel, on the Bet Rivers Network, on YouTube. And as we've talked about, and so has everybody else, 5 straight nights starting tomorrow night with the Notre Dame Penn State game, followed by the Texas Ohio State game, followed by 3 days of NFL playoffs. We'll hold the NFL for our Football Friday show. Okay. Um, I'll get into some other NFL topics today, some coaching things and everything else. But as far as the previews and predictions on the games, I will wait till Friday for that. Um, the games are interesting. They really are because people are believing in Denver going into Buffalo because of what they did last week. Be careful with that, though. That game can't. It was like a preseason game for Kansas City. It should not be treated as anything else. It should be completely thrown out in your evaluation. They're in a tough spot in Buffalo, in a 2-7 matchup, and the average 2-7 matchup, I think, has ended with about a 12-point finish most of the time. That's been about the average win. I think Green Bay going into Philly might be the best 7 we've had since we've been in this format. That's how alive they are. Um, Sounds like Hurt's going to play. I'd be shocked if he didn't. He hasn't been cleared officially by the protocol, but I think that's a formality now. I really would be absolutely shocked if he didn't play. Um, the other Flowers is an injury you got to watch for the Ravens. That's a fascinating game because you always have to beware of playoff matchups that are in the division. It matters. It changes things. Plus, you have the Pittsburgh defense, which is always able to give a big effort. And historically, except for really the last game, they have been very good at bottling up Baltimore. So that'll be interesting. I think everyone thinks the Ravens are going to win. I think the Ravens are going to win. And if you looked at it and it wasn't Pittsburgh and they had Pittsburgh's profile, you would think they're going to win by 20. Be careful, though, because they know each other so well. And Pittsburgh's defense is able to come up with a big effort despite the fact that they look lost. They really do. But I'm not as overwhelmed on that game as far as the favorite as I would normally be because I fear a little bit about the division, their familiarity, and the Pittsburgh defense. Um, Houston, I think, was lucky to make the playoffs. I told you anybody who was going to play Houston, I was going to pick against them. I will. I'll pick the Chargers. Um, and then obviously the other games are the Tampa Washington game is a very, very tight game. Rams, Vikings, same thing. And a good game with the Eagles and Packers. Packers are a live team. Eagles are really good. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a great Packer effort. But I think Packers are capable of winning that game. Doesn't mean they'll win that game, but I think they're capable of winning that game. First thing you have to do is have a team that's capable of winning that game. And I think they are capable of it because of what they bring to the table. All right, we'll get to all that on Friday. Let's spend a minute on the college playoffs first. Notre Dame, Penn State. I'm not a big Franklin fan. He's struggled mightily in big games. We know that. This Penn State team is very, very good, very talented, excellent defense, can run the ball. They have a good quarterback. They have a great tight end. I mean, they are a very dangerous team. This is a pretty even matchup. And Notre Dame's got some injuries. We know that. Notre Dame's good in all three phases. Their special teams is a big plus for them. I don't see a big difference in this game. I'm on Notre Dame. I told you I thought Notre Dame was going to get to play for the championship this year. I still think they will. I was kind of looking towards Ohio State. You see, I picked all the other games except Ohio State, Oregon. I didn't pick it. I thought it was kind of a toss-up. I was way off because Ohio State killed them, which I wasn't surprised. I think none of us expected that, especially when Oregon's already beaten them. But Ohio State's the best team. Despite their awful Michigan performance, they're the best team. They have the best player in a freshman wide receiver in Smith, who's the best player in the country. Um, they're a very, very good team and a hard team to beat. I don't think there's any question. I'm going to go with Notre Dame. The three phases, special teams will be a big factor. I like the Notre Dame's defense. I like the Notre Dame mentality. They turn people over. They capitalize. They are an opportunistic team that you have to be on your guard every play of the game because they will hurt you on offense, they will hurt you on defense, they will hurt you on special teams. They will block a punt. They will. The only thing they don't do well is kick field goals, and they did that pretty well last week. But that's not. They haven't done that well this year. Um, Tight game. Not a very. I mean, I think the winner gets 20, 23. Not one of these college games that goes to 45, 50. I think the winner's in the low 20s. I think Notre Dame wins the game by probably 3, 4 points. Not much more than that. I know they're only a point and a half favorite. I see Notre Dame by 23-20, 23-17, something like that, in that vein. But I think Notre Dame's going to win. The other game, I'm not a big Texas fan. I know how talented they are. They're good on both lines. They might have the best defense in the country. They probably do. But last week, Arizona moved the ball up and down the field on them. I don't think they're as good as their talent as a team. I think there's just something that's a little missing there. That game last week, they should have blown Arizona State out of the building. They scored 2 touchdowns in the first 3 plays of the game for them. On 2 pass plays, they scored a touchdown. They scored a touchdown on a punt return. And they still had to really get breaks to win that game. Remember, if that targeting call had been called properly, Arizona State's got a great chance to win the game in regulation. They didn't call it, which was a gutless call because it was absolutely targeting. I think the game opens Ohio State 6.5. I think this morning I saw it was 5.5. Let me see let me give you an update right now on the odds. Notre Dame's 1.5 and they're 6. I think Ohio State wins. I think it's going to be very hard for Texas to figure out how to handle a player who has, just epic, incredible ability, and that's Jeremiah Smith. If you're wondering, he's number 4 for Ohio State. In the Oregon game, he had 187. I don't think he caught a pass in the second half. He might have. They were up 34-0. He might have caught one in the second half, but basically he played in seriousness half the game and went 7 for 187 for 2 touchdowns. He had 150 yards in the first quarter. He has to be stopped or he will destroy the game. He's that good. He is an incredible talent. He reminds me of Calvin Johnson. If he was coming out this year, and remember, he is a freshman. If he was coming out this year, he would be the best player, first player picked. He's the best player in the country. There were games. Now, that's why, I killed Ohio State for their offensive philosophy against Michigan. Give Michigan credit for their defensive system, for their defensive players, and how they shut down Ohio State in that game. But he never went to Smith. Smith caught 5 balls for 35 yards. I am sure Texas has spent every waking minute looking at the Michigan tape. Now, Wink is good. He devises stuff. That game, Smith had a touchdown, but he was 5 catches for 35 yards. I mean, Just crazy. Absolutely crazy when you think about it. I mean, it really is. Um, he didn't have to do much against Indiana. He didn't do much against Michigan. He had 2 touchdowns and 100 yards against Tennessee, and he had 187 and 2 touchdowns against Oregon. He is a huge factor in the game and has to be dealt with. But they're good everywhere. There's nothing they aren't good at, and they're good defensively. I think they're the best team in the country. I think they'll beat Texas. Um, Now, Texas, and a lot of people are probably jumping on Texas with 6 points because Texas is a very talented team. But I think Ohio State's playing with a new purpose, a renewed purpose since that Michigan loss. And they looked overwhelming against Oregon. Now, it's always dangerous to let the last game impact your thinking on the next game. But I do think in this case, this team is hitting its stride at the right time. I think Ohio State wins this game, and I think they win it by more than a touchdown. So I think, from my standpoint, I think you're going to have a Notre Dame Ohio State championship game, which would be a great game. I mean, it's not a bad game in the mix, but if you get Notre Dame in the championship game against Ohio State or Texas, but especially against Ohio State, that will light up the middle of that country, and the rating will be enormous. Absolutely enormous. So, listen, big year for the Big Ten. No question about it. Franklin and Freeman is going to the championship game. It is going to be a very big time for one of them. And obviously, there's been pressure on both the Ohio State coach and the Texas coach, especially the Ohio State coach, who is people calling for his ouster after another bad performance against Michigan, as we know. So I'm going with Notre Dame, and I'm going with Ohio State. And we'll see what happens in the next 2 days. Then we got the playoffs, the NFL playoffs starting on Saturday. Like I said, we'll get into those games in depth on Friday. Let me get to a couple of things here. Now, Antonio Pierce, who I've always liked personally, always liked him. He used to do a spot on our show with us years ago. Always very candid, good leader, good player. I think a good leader of men. Not a great X's and O's guy, but a good leader of men. That's a bad roster. That wasn't his fault. But, you pay the price. So you have the Jets open, the Bears open, the Raiders, Jacksonville, Saints, Pats. Pats are going for Vrabel. You can write that down. They've already completed their Rooney Rule thing, which is a complete. We see when people don't want to deal with it, it's a complete farce. You just bring somebody in, boom, get it done, and it's over. But it's in the long run, their feeling is, hey, if we present people, they're going to have advantages. So that's the idea. Bears were turned down in their quest to interview McCarthy. So that means Jerry Jones wouldn't have done that unless he was keeping McCarthy. So that means McCarthy's staying in Dallas. Because otherwise, why would he care if he went to the Bears? He wouldn't care. So he said no. They're talking to Pete Carroll. I'm going to tell you something. I really think, and listen, if you go back with me to when they let Salah go, I wanted them to bring Pete Carroll in then. They needed that kind of firm hand. Someone who could handle New York, handle that team, handle Rodgers. Pete was perfect. If they had brought in Pete with the right offensive coordinator, they would be playing this weekend. Jets were 5-12. They were not an ordinary 5-12. There are 7 games they played. They could have absolutely won without even it being a big deal. They lost 10-9 to Denver. They outgained Denver in that game. They lost 23-17 to Minnesota. They outgained Minnesota in that game. They lost 23-20 to the Bills. They outgained the Bills in that game. They lost to the Pats 25-22, outgained the Pats in that game. Lost to the Colts 28-27. Of these 7 games, the only game that they were outgained in terms of yardage was the Colt game. Every other game, one was even, 5 for the Jets. I'm going to show you how in a second how crazy this thing is with the Jets. First of all, they blew 5 leads in the fourth quarter. 5 in the fourth, unheard of. And they lost 10-9 to Denver, 23-17 to Minnesota, 23-20 to the Bills, 25-22 to the Pats, 28-27 to the Colts, 26-21 to Seattle, 32-26 to Miami. They would lump in terrible preparation, incredibly bad game coaching, incredibly bad communications, bad kicking, stupid penalties at the wrong time, defensive breakdowns, lump all that in, put it in, mix it up, and that's how they lost 7 games they could have easily won. I think they should have been a minimum of 6-1 in those 7 games. That's 11 wins, folks. This team, with the right moves now and the right coach brought in and Aaron Rodgers retained, will be next year's Chargers. Last year, the Chargers were 5-12. This year, they're 11-6 because they have Jim Harbaugh. They added a couple of pieces. They hit on Laird McConkey, but the bottom line is they were badly coached last year, well coached this year. Jets can break it down, hire a general manager, hire a young offensive coordinator, draft a quarterback or try and get one from somewhere, and let's all these veterans go. Not resign guys. Say goodbye to a couple of the core players. And you know what? They can start from scratch. And you can wait 2 or 3 years and think you got a future or hope you have a future. Or see if you drafted another terrible situation at quarterback. Or mess up the guy again, even if he can play, like Donald. It's not the way to go. It's not the way to go. If Woody would hand me and say, I'm going to give you the right to make these decisions today, go ahead. What would you do? I would bring Dimitrov in as my general manager. I would hire Pete Carroll as my head coach. Pete Carroll's 73, but he is the youngest 73 in the world. He's 73 going on 60. And he's got the right temperament for this situation. And he would have an immediate, enormous impact. Now, where I'm going to be very hard on Pete is the offensive coordinator. Pete's a defensive coach. We know that. He's got a defensive mentality. He has a defensive philosophy. Learned it from Bud Grant. It's a sound defensive philosophy. It always has been. I'm not worried about him with the defense. I'm worried about him with the offense. I want to have a lot of input into the offensive coordinator. Now, I would love to get certain guys, but I can't steal somebody's offensive coordinator. That move can't be made. I can't bring Liam Cohen and steal him and make him the offensive coordinator. I can't do that. I can't even make him the head coach in waiting. They don't buy that. That assistant head coach tag or any of that stuff is out. You're a coach and you're a head coach. So the only way you can hire Liam Cohen from away from Tampa is if you make him the head coach. He's not ready to come in here and handle this situation here. If he does that, he's going to want to rebuild, and he's going to want to find the quarterback and develop and think he's going to be here for 10 years, and maybe he will. But that's not what is needed right now. It's not going to take advantage of what they have done here. They have a playoff core. They just were so badly coached, it disintegrated. Another example. There were 4 5 and 12 teams in the league this year. Carolina was 5 and 12. The Bears were 5 and 12. New Orleans was 5 and 12. Carolina was minus 1,811 yards from scrimmage. They were outgained in those 17 games by 1,811 yards. New Orleans was outgained by 1,015 yards. The Bears were outgained by just under 1,000 yards. You know how many yards the Jets were outgained by? None, because they outgained their opponents at 5 and 12. They were plus 70 yards with a 5 and 12 team. Carolina was 1,800 yards to the negative. That's over 100 yards a game. The Jets were plus. The Jets were plus 13 in passing touchdowns against their opponents. They were minus 14 on rushing touchdowns because they never developed the right running game, the right mentality, or the right offensive line mentality to play the way they should have played. And that's why they were so bad on fourth down, and that's why they were so bad in the red zone, because in the red zone, you must be able to run the ball to be an efficient team. Listen, this team next year, what I'm telling you is, and what I'm telling Woody is, if he plays his cards right and brings in the right guy and then puts in the right touches, he doesn't have to go out and get 10 players. He just needs to fine tune here. Yes, they should bring a quarterback on when they're comfortable with a guy they like as a prospect and start to develop him. But for next year, they should keep Aaron Rodgers and put him on a team, and he's the quarterback, nothing else. He's not in charge. He shows up when he's told to show up. He doesn't make the rules. He doesn't go off somewhere. And I'm the only one who yelled about him not being here that time because I knew that was a big factor. And it set a terrible tone. Everyone's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference. No one cares. Yeah, it mattered a lot because it showed that he could do whatever the hell he wanted. You can't have a player doing whatever the hell he wants. Seen that, and you've heard it from Rex Ryan the last couple of days as Rex Ryan tries to, somehow wipe away his cold career and then convince everybody he's some Vince Lombardi character. I mean, he's not. He should not be hired. I like Rex, but he should not be the coach. He was not a great head coach by any stretch. A great defensive coordinator. If he wants that job, we can talk. They need the right touch. The right touch. Don't let the Bears hire Pete Carroll. I don't know if they will, but don't let them hire him. Bring him in here. Super Bowl winning coach who can handle this town, who's got the personality to run that team, the personality to handle the media. The only thing I want to work with Pete on is who we decide is the offensive coordinator because it's critical. And then they need a little fine tuning, but more than anything else, they need a mentality change and good coaching at wide receiver, good coaching at running back, good coaching at offensive line. That's what they need. They need sideline communication. They need someone who knows how to run the game and handle timeouts and handle situations. They were deplorable. They were the worst coached team that had talent I've ever seen. But I'm telling you, do the right things here. And I'm telling you, right now, they could be a playoff team next year. Don't lose that right now. Rodgers isn't done. I bet you he's going to play somewhere else. The guy had 28 touchdown passes and had at least 6 touchdowns dropped. And he could play better. And if he had an offensive line and protection where he didn't have to get rid of the ball so quickly, he could have had 35 touchdown passes. I watched every game. He could have easily had a ton more touchdown passes this year. And he had 28 as it is. And 11 picks. You think you're going to have a quarterback in here next year who goes 28 and 11? I doubt it. They lost games. They invented ways to lose games this year. They gave games away. They gave the Miami game away because they didn't know how to handle the clock. I mean, I'm sure Ulbricht's a nice man. He was so overmatched. It was unbelievable. It's the worst coaching staff I've ever seen. I mean, it might have been worse than Kotite. Hard to believe. I bet you they tried harder because Kotite, didn't put in a day's work. If they can break it down and go ahead. More power to you because with that is always the idea that we can sell the fans on the future. We're going to bring in the right guy. This is the time. We're going to touch magic with the GM. We're going to touch magic with the coach. We're going to find the right quarterback. You know what? Odds of them doing that is so short, it's ridiculous. They stink at it. You want them to hit on all three? Well, if they don't, they're not going anywhere. You have to have three things in place to win big in this league: quarterback, coach, and owner. And the owner's just got to give you the tools and get out of the way. But it's got to give you the tools. They don't get the tools. They get a negative from the owner, and that's something they have to live with. They got to get the coach and the quarterback. Have the quarterback. I know a lot of people don't like him right now. A lot of people are down on him. Fine. But if you think he was terrible this year, then you don't know what terrible is. His play can improve so much, and he was still at times dynamic this year. And they had more drops than any team in the league. He did a lot of things wrong this year. I'm not being an apologist for him. He clearly played with an injury at times. The biggest thing was he was rushed all the time. There was indecision bringing the plays in, and he was rushed all the time, and he was never comfortable behind that offensive line. So he always was anticipating the guys' moves, the wide receivers, and he didn't know them well enough to anticipate them properly. When he got Adams, he connected with him because he knows what he's going to do. He was always getting rid of the ball before he had to because of the fact that Corey wanted to, because he was always rushed. Do things properly, and that will change remarkably. And then they would be a dynamic offense. Oh, Wilson, he can't get along. Nonsense. Nonsense. Complete nonsense. I doubt they'll go this way, but I'm telling you, it would not be heavy lifting for them to win 11 games next year. They need to get, what do they have to have? They have to have, obviously, better luck with some health because you know what? They missed key guys in that front seven this year. Mosley was such a big part of what they did in recent years. He wasn't there. And they gave away some really good run stoppers, and that was a big mistake. Have to bring back another big run stopper. That's a critical part. Critical. They have to get Sauce Gardner to play football again because he stunk this year. He's not the best. He thinks he's the best. He's not the best. He can be really good, though. And he's salvageable. The only problem is if he asks for the moon, he really would test my patience. But he does have ability. He's not what he thinks he is. He's not on an express train to Canton. They have enough ingredients. They need to fine tune this roster. They need a better tight end. Check. They need a better slot receiver. Easy to find. They need some more versatility and depth on the offensive line. Everybody does. That's up to the guy who coaches the offensive line is so critical in the NFL because if he knows what he's doing and he builds a unit that has toughness and versatility, you are halfway home. Offensive line coaches are critical. And they were so bad, it was scary. I don't think this will ever happen, but I hate to see this going out the door because it really is fixable. They're not in a bad place if they just do the right things, but they're such a bad organization, they don't know how to do the right things. Woody wasn't wrong for hiring Sal, and if somebody hires Sal as a head coach right now, they should be laughed out of the league. The guy's a terrible head coach. How could you watch him coach and then hire him as a head coach? Would I hire him as a defensive coordinator? Yes. Would I hire him as a head coach? Not on my life. I mean, if a team hires him as a head coach, they're gonna get laughed out of the league. Give me a break. Oh, he's a candidate 2 places. What, to be a head coach? There's no chance. I'll fall over he gets hired as a head coach of his resume. How could you look at his head coaching resume and hire him? Now, is that a defensive coordinator? Absolutely. Absolutely. Hire him tomorrow. He's a good defensive coordinator. He's not a good he's a bad head coach. It happens all the time. I can give you some of the great coordinators of all time who are terrible head coaches. Norv Turner, Bill Arnsparger. You can go down the list. This is fixable, but it's got to be handled just right. What are the chances of that? I told you. Dimitrov, Pete Carroll, keep Rodgers, fine tune at 4 or 5 key spots. Upgrade tight end, upgrade defensive tackle, depth on the defensive line. I want a little more versatility and toughness on the offensive line. I can live with the rest of the defense if it's healthy, if I get my run pluggers. I want to bring back the guys in that secondary. I don't want to lose any of them. I don't want to lose certain guys. And I would get rid of a couple of the older figures on offense. I'm not going to go through every player now. I would make some subtle changes. I'd like to improve at the slot. I'd like to improve at tight end. Get some versatility on the line. I'm good with my backs. I'm good with my 2 starting wide receivers. I need to increase the depth on the defensive line and bring in a good run plugger and get the guys back who were hurt this year. And I can live with the rest of the defense and find a field goal kicker because that was a disaster this year. But if they get the coach, and the key for Pete will be, he's a defensive coach, will be the offensive coordinator. It's critical. And you sit and you give Rodgers an ultimatum. You are here to play. You can be Aaron Rodgers and go do your interviews, but you're not running this franchise. You're not have anything to do with personnel. And you come and you do what you're told to do. Case closed. And then let's go get him. This can change in just look what Harbaugh did. 5-12 to 11-6. That can be next year, the Jets, without any question. Let's see what the Bears are going to do. I don't know what the Raiders are going to do. I have no idea. Jacksonville, usual suspects. Saints, a lot of talk about Aaron Glenn with the Saints. I don't know about that. We'll see. A lot of talk there about that. And Vrabel's going to be with the Pats. I don't know if Ben Johnson gets a job this year or not. I don't really care. Liam Cohen has already said he has no problem waiting if it's not right this year. He said he's only 39. Tampa's willing to up his ante a lot and keep him. They'd love to get another year out of him. He said he'd have no problem coming back and doing it again as offensive coordinator. He doesn't mind waiting to be a head coach. He's not in any rush. So I don't know where that'll go. He could wind up. Slovak, clearly the bloom came off the rose there. It's not his fault. It's just the disintegration of the offensive line and the injuries to the wide receivers killed that team. I think they're going to be one and done. I think the Chargers will beat them. Their offense has completely fallen apart. Absolutely, completely fallen apart. Now, a couple other things. First, let me tell you about the newsletter. Sign up today for the Mike Francesa podcast newsletter at MikeFrancesa'Podcast.com. You get videos. We do some different things there. More than that, you get merchandise. There's going to be all this Mike Francesa merchandise that you can get, and you can win some goodies and do different things. So all you got to do is sign up. Give them your email or whatever they want, and away you go. MikeFrancesa'Podcast.com. Also, the prop packs. Now, check it out. I want to get to the NBA in a second. Check out the all-new prop packs exclusively at Bet Rivers. Place a qualifying NBA same game parlay, and you'll receive a prop pack. You'll earn extra rewards from your player card based on the number of points that your player scores. You can open the cards up and boom, be a big winner and pick up 10,000 bonus dollars right there. Terms and conditions apply. See the Bet Rivers app for full details. Tear into the action with prop packs. Now, I don't talk much about the NBA in the regular season. Um, I got plenty of time to talk about the Knicks, who still need a bench player badly, and hopefully can get Robinson back because they need that too. They need a rim protector. Rare game. I was big on Cleveland this year. I bet 3 over unders this year, and I picked 3. I picked Cleveland over because I love Kenny Atkinson. I like him personally. I love him as a coach. Should have been a head coach years ago, and Cleveland should lock him up and pay him some money because he's like I think the lowest paid coach in the league, and look what he's done. He's a terrific coach. Look at the year they're having. They were over 48.5. I think they could do that in another week. Utah under and Oklahoma City over. Now the Oklahoma City over was steep because it was 57. Cleveland's was 48.5, so it was a big difference. But I just thought that team was, tremendous, and they've obviously done it with a big injury. But tonight, a rare game. 31-4 Cleveland hosting 30-5 Oklahoma City. Again, 31-4 Cleveland. I think there's only been 24 teams in the history of the league that have won 30 games out of 35 or better to start a season. One has a 15-game win streak, one has a 10-game win streak. One's 31-4, one's 30-5. I mean, that's fascinating. I'm sorry, there's not many times, and if anybody sits out who isn't hurt, shame on them. Shame on them. In this league, that's the biggest thing that just drives you nuts about this. I turned on a game the other night, and I'm like, why isn't this guy playing? Oh, they decided this was a rest night. A rest night. What are these rest nights? Give me a break. Will Chamberlain used to play every game and play every minute of every game. And he did everything. And he had people hanging on him for 48 minutes, and they were beating the hell out of him. And he had to pound people and rebound. I mean, give me a break. It just drives you nuts. That league has really almost destroyed itself in the regular season. That's how bad it is. The playoffs are still good, but the regular season is so meaningless and has been so sullied. Ugh. But tonight, they have a rare night. Let's screw it up somehow. I want to get to St. John's for a second. Before the season started, I told you St. John's was going to be really good. I told you they could be a Final 8 team. They can be. First of all, let me tell you, for the St. John fans who have been waiting for the year, they should have gotten the NCAA tournament last year. They didn't. That was unfair, but they didn't. They're going to the NCAA tournament this year. And it gets good when they get to the Sweet 16 if they can win those first 2 games. They can do that, and they can get to from the Final 8. You don't know who you're going to. You might be Duke in the next round, and in the Final 8 game, and Auburn. Hey, there's some great teams out there. I mean, Auburn jumps out at me. Duke jumps out at me. I'm not as high on Tennessee, although I think they're really good. Hey, you have a night like that, you go into Florida, you're undefeated, so you're a target. And your big player, Lanier, who's a great shooter, comes out and misses his first 10 shots. So you have a night like that and you get beat by 30. Now, ironically, just off the beaten path for a second, that was the biggest defeat by a number 1 team, or number 1 ranked team, since 1968. You know what team that was? The Houston Cougars. Now, you might not remember what happened that year. There was a game that changed basketball because it was the first game that was ever syndicated. It was played in the Astrodome. It was UCLA against Houston. Elvin Hayes, Lou Alcindor. Lou got an eye injury. He got poked in the eye before the game. Not that day, but I mean a couple of days before. He had to play with an eye patch. I wasn't even sure he was going to play. His vision was impaired. His play was impaired. Houston won. Elvin Hayes had an enormous game. And UCLA lost and seethed the rest of the season, waiting for the day they would meet up with Houston again. They did in the Final Four. And they paid him back to the tune of 101-69. That was the biggest loss by a number one team until last night, and then last night, 30 points. So that was the game, an historic game, one of the historic games ever, a Final Four game where that great Houston team was beaten 101-69 by UCLA. Back to St. John's. St. John's beat Butler the other night, which is not a good team. But they were like 1 for 21 from three. Last night they go into Xavier, which has been losing but is dangerous. They had a bad night from three themselves. But St. John's wins by 10 at Xavier. Not an easy place to play. On the road in the Big East. And shoots 2 for 16 from three. And they win by 10. Why did they win by 10? Because last night they made their free throws, which is an issue for them. It's not really an issue for them. It's an issue for two of them. It's an issue for the two guys who get to the foul line all the time. That's the big key. The guys who get to the foul line, they have three players who get to the foul line all the time. Only one of those three makes free throws. That's the problem. Lewis makes his free throws. Zuby doesn't make his free throws. Richmond, for some reason this year, doesn't make his free throws. Last night, they all made their free throws. And St. John's, which will kill you turning you over, will kill you in the open floor, as good a transition team as there is in the country, and has the mid-sized people who can switch everything and can really shut things down with the way Pitino orchestrates the defense. They kill you on the glass. They had 18 offensive rebounds last night. The problem with St. John's is if they can just elevate their shooting to where they can get a few open threes that they can knock down and make the big free throw, especially Richmond, who can get to the basket anytime he wants, this team could go with his coaching, and he's a great coach. This team could go to the Final Eight. I don't say the Final Four because when you get to the Final Eight, they catch Duke in the Final Eight game, they're probably going to get beat. They catch Auburn in the Final Eight game, they're probably going to get beat. Those teams are better than them. But you're seeing something that's interesting. St. John's is 4-1 in the Big East. Been a long time. Georgetown last year won 2 Big East games. They last night were trying to go 4-0, and they scared Marquette and lost, but they're 3-1 in the Big East. Villanova, which has been incredibly maligned in Neptune's third year, a lot of people thinking he's going to get fired this year, and he probably would if he doesn't get to the NCAA tournament. But right now they're 3-1 in the league. They've been playing better. Now Marquette's 5-0 and UConn's 4-0. UConn is at Villanova tonight. It's a huge game for Villanova. If he could spring that upset, that really will get the pressure off him, and they'd be 4-1 in the league. You're seeing a resurgence. Cooley's doing a nice job at Georgetown. Pitino at St. John's. And you're hoping Villanova can maybe start to show a little of what they used to show on a daily basis under a great coach in Jay Wright. But that's a big game for them tonight. But St. John's, are they going can they win the Big East tournament? Yes. Will they? Who knows? The UConn game, whenever it happens, is going to be a lot of fun. if it happens. Hopefully, it happens, especially in the Big East tournament. I want to see them play each other. Um, that's those games this year are going to be intense. Utah, UConn, and St. John's. Um, St. John's is going to the NCAA tournament. You can write it down, and they're not going there just to show up and say, "Oh, we made the NCAA tournament," and go out in the first round in an 8-9 game. They have a chance to do damage in this tournament. Do I think they could win the championship? No. Do I think they could get to a Final Four? Maybe. I think they could get to a Final Eight, and I think they will get to the Sweet 16. They're going to be a nasty matchup for somebody. Would I like to see them have a guy who could consistently bury a three? Yes. Do they have that? No. There are nights Lewis makes threes. There are nights Wilchers make threes. There are nights Smith makes threes. You know, um, but nothing consistent. Smith is a huge key to the team. A enormous three. Dunlap was supposed to be the designated three shooter, but he doesn't get any time anymore. They need somebody to make threes. A lot of these games they don't make any, but if they go 2 for 20 against UConn, they're not winning. They go 2 for 20 against Marquette, they're not winning the game. They can win against these other teams, but they're not going to beat UConn. They're not going to beat Marquette if they play these guys and go 2 for 20. It's not going to happen. But there is a resurgence. And what you hope to get under Pitino, you're going to get this year. You're going to get your NCAA tournament bid. You're going to get a lot of excitement come February and March, and you're going to get a team that can do some damage in the NCAA tournament. It's a good team, getting better. Just watch Richmond and Zuby on the foul line and whether or not they can make some open threes. I'm not asking for a lot, just a couple. Just not 1 for 21 or 2 for 16, because that's not going to get it done in the big spot. Best teams in the country. Duke, by March, will probably be the best team in the country. They're not yet. But Cooper Flagg's the best player in the country. And Auburn is absolutely dynamic. They're the best team in the country. I said that, and I know a couple people said to me, "What are you talking about? Tennessee's ranked number 1. They're unbeaten." I wasn't worried about Tennessee. I like Tennessee. I don't like them in the tournament, though, because Rick Barnes always has trouble in the tournament. But they have a very good team and a terrific defense and a great shooter in Lanier. He is a tremendous shooter. But I think this could be a very, very, really a good year for St. John's in a big way. Now, I want to close with one other thing. I was watching, there was a lot of good basketball on last night. You had St. John's playing Xavier. You had Duke playing Pitt. You had Kentucky playing Georgia. You had, obviously, the Florida-Tennessee game. You had UCLA Michigan later. Michigan won that. You had a ton of good games last night. So I was watching a lot of college basketball, and I was not watching the TGL, which is this golf creation that Tiger Woods and Rory got behind. Now, when Tiger Woods' name's on it, obviously it lends a lot of credibility to anything because it's Tiger Woods. But I started watching it because Harrison came down and said to me, "Dad, Max Homa just tweeted that I must be going wild." He said, "I must be going wild about watching this thing going crazy. I can't like it." Well, he hit that on the head. That was a 50-foot putt that went in for Max, because I watched it, and all I'd say is, if that's the future of sports, we're all in trouble. They built this arena, and your Met owner is involved here, because you got a bunch of owners who put $2 billion in a pot. And I'm talking about Steve Cohn. I'm talking about John Henry, Werner, a bunch of other guys. Put $2 billion, spare change for them, in a pot, and wanted to get involved in golf stuff. Well, one of the things they got involved was this, And what this is it's simulator. If you know what a golf simulator is, how you hit the ball into the canvas, and it's a picture, the whole thing of a golf tournament play, the whole thing is it's like a golf game, a computerized golf game, but you have a simulator, and then they go over and putt it on the side. It is just a concept that makes no sense. It was so tedious. I actually got the idea that the people who were in there, who probably were paid to be in there or were employees, because they looked so bored, it was ridiculous. They built this edifice in Palm Beach Gardens, which probably 2 years from now will be Steve Cohen's home. He'll probably turn it into his home when there's nothing to do with it anymore. This thing was dreadful. ESPN was all over it. They were pounding it. Everybody who has a hand in, so many people are being paid by either DraftKings or FanDuel that anything that they are involved in, there's people shilling for, because they got a zillion employees. They pay so many different people money, so everybody's shilling for either FanDuel or DraftKings. So this was FanDuel, and this thing was a joke. All they should have done is, when the golfers got up to tee off, they should have been shooting seltzer water at them, and then there should have been a clown's mouth out there in a windmill. That's all you needed. It was so bad, it was ridiculous. The TGL. Now, Tiger Woods is involved, except Tiger Woods was so involved that he wasn't there for grand opening. He wasn't there last night. I don't know why. I didn't get that. I didn't see the beginning. But there's teams. Hey, this is, I understand people like computer games and they think this is a new age deal. This thing, golf's in trouble. They've done, Live has hurt golf dramatically. Golf is hurting because Tiger isn't playing and Phil has fallen apart and no one has replaced them. Two golfers, really big golfers, well, three. I should count Jordan Spieth, who's not as good as these other two players anymore, but Victor Hovland and the best player in the world, Scotty Scheffler, both said no to this. Congratulations to them for not lending their, taking the fast buck for this thing, which was really embarrassing. And some people won't say it because it's Tiger Woods and it's Rory. And then they don't want to get Tiger Woods mad or Rory mad. Now, listen, I'm sure Tiger Woods is making a buck off it. I'm sure Rory's making a buck off it. And no one's going to dispute that Tiger Woods is as good as we've ever seen. That has nothing to do with this. This is a bad idea. That is not going to work. It's just dreadful. Dreadful. And if you watched it, you know it. The TGL. If this lasts... Now, it was supposed to start last year, but the roof caved in, so they had to wait another year. Well, you know what? It started last night, and the roof caved in again. We'll see you later.